Okay, guys, let's bring it back together. I'm going to go through and do this myself. Um, so let's see. I have this image that I prepared, and I'm just going to copy that and put it here inside the images folder. There we go.
Is that the best way to get it in? I tried to do it.
That's what she said.
Trouble.
What, doing it in Atom? Yeah, that's what Juan was asking about earlier. I don't think Atom actually has a built-in way to do it, or at least I haven't been able to get it work. I don't know. How does I do this? Yeah, I don't know why it's weird about that. Okay, that's fine. Go away. Yeah. So I mean, what I would do is I would just copy it and then just have this thing open and just paste it in there. Not as far as I know. It seems like a big oversight on Atom's part. So there probably is like some sort of a Atom package you can install or something that'll take care of it for you. But I just don't know what it is off the top of my head. All right, so I have my seal in there. So I saw a lot of people trying stuff like this: image, source, assets, images, seal.jpg. Let's see. I think I have Rails running. Yep. And then when you go here and try to look at it, you get an error. And this is because of this whole asset pipeline thing. You can't just link to it the way you would anywhere else. It's a little bit more complicated. This is why you're strongly encouraged to use this image tag thing, which takes care of a lot of the grunt work for you. With this thing, all I have to do is just write in the name of the image, so it's seal.jpg, and then it finds it for me, and there it is. So the instructions said to use the web inspector to just compare how these things are done in different environments. So if I take a look at this, actually I'm gonna do something else. I'm just gonna go look in here. We can see that it's right here. So it has this huge weird address right there. That's definitely not something that I created. So the asset pipeline, it takes every asset that you have and it gives it its own weird path like this. It comes up with a path for it. The biggest reason for that is something called cache busting. So that's cache not as in cash money, but as in C-A-C-H-E. So the cache is something in your browser where whenever you go to a page, the browser is going to store any images that you look at. It may even store the entire URL. And your browser is doing that all the time whenever you go to a website. And that's fine except for when someone changes those assets. So let's say you go to a site where they have a CSS file. Then the developer changes that CSS file and you reload the site. Your web browser is going to try to save memory by using whatever CSS file it has cached, whichever one it has stored. And so you're going to see the old CSS. A way to get around that is to change the URL at which the CSS file is located. So what we're doing here is it's generating this huge, weird path right there. Whenever you re-upload the image, it's going to change that path. That ensures that whoever's looking at your site is always going to have the most recent version. You can see the exact same thing up here with all these other assets, all of the JavaScript and CSS and everything. They also have those really weird paths at the end of them. That's ensuring that anytime they're changed, again, the URL is always going to be updated. And so whoever's looking at the site, their browser is not going to have this cache, so it's just going to reload it. So every time you change it, it's ensuring that the browser is going to reload that stuff. That's one of the things that this whole asset pipeline does, is this cache busting thing, where it prevents things from being cached and prevents users from just seeing the same thing over and over again. Any questions about that? I'll get into uploading it in a second. Does that make sense? It's a really nice thing because I've definitely had to worry about that with like my own CSS and everything. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to push this up to Heroku. Git push, Heroku, master. Oops, git m, git commit, added seal image, git push, Heroku master, and it'll do its thing. Okay, now you can see that it's doing this rake assets precompile. So this assets precompile, that's the process of taking all the assets you have and adding in those weird URLs. It does a couple other things too, which we're going to look at right about now. So let's see, that's tuner, Robin, Redux. All right, here's the seal image again, and when I look at the source code, oops. I didn't expect that actually. It has the exact same URL. That's interesting. I'm not entirely sure why that is. I expected that to be different, but maybe it's just reusing it because there hasn't really been a change to this yet. So it's just reusing the same old thing. But another thing to note is that over here, we have a whole bunch of JavaScript files. We haven't actually done anything with that JavaScript yet, but it's there. Whereas here, we only have one JavaScript file and one CSS file. So the other thing that this asset pipeline does, oh, it looks like we have jQuery in here. The other thing the asset pipeline does is it takes all of your JavaScript and smushes them into one JavaScript file. It takes all of your CSS and smushes that into one CSS file. That increases the efficiency of your app so that your users don't have to make so many HTTP requests. They don't have to load so many files. It smushes them all together. And then also, instead of having to create a whole new URL for each one, it only has to do that once for CSS and once for JavaScript, and then it prevents all that weird caching stuff. So that's fine, but the problem is when it smushes everything together, sometimes it doesn't smush it together in the order that you want. So one thing that is helpful is to do rake assets precompile. So I'm just doing this locally. I'm not doing it in Heroku. And what it's doing right now is it's smushing together, there, you can see it. It's smushing together all of those files into just a few individual little files right here. And so if I go and look, let's see, it looks like they're in public/assets/ well, just public/assets. If I go and look in there, there it is. That's weird. I expected you to be smushed together. I expected you to be smushed together as well. Ah, well, that's disappointing. So I guess it doesn't actually smush it together. Yeah, you can see me like getting confused about the asset pipeline stuff. That's because the asset pipeline is really pretty complicated. And so actually pushing stuff up to Heroku, not that bad. Getting the assets to work exactly the way you want, though, that's a lot trickier with how this whole asset pipeline thing goes. When it works, it's really nice. When it doesn't, it's kind of annoying to figure out. So I'm anticipating that most of you are probably going to have some sort of an asset pipeline error at some point. Star, did you have a question? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So if I wanted to have multiple style sheets? Oh, I see what you're saying. So when you go and look in here, you see this require tree dot thing? So this, it looks like a comment, but it's actually a special, like, Rails specific command. This is something that only Rails has, where it's telling Rails to look for any other style sheets that may be in this folder, and then sort of include them in this style sheet. So if you don't actually want to use every single style sheet, then what you're going to do is just remove that line. And then it's only going to include the style sheets that you specifically want. So if I had one called, like, I don't know, styles.css, now I'm being explicit about which different styles I want to include where. So if I wanted to include one style sheet on one page and another on another page, you can actually see how to do it right in your layout. you see this style sheet link tag thing? It's got a whole bunch of other stuff on it. You don't actually need all that. If my style sheet was called, like, if it was wombat.css, then I would just do wombat. And then that would include it and generate a style tag for it. Does that answer your question? Cool. Start. Mm-hmm. No, so what media does, what media all does is it just puts in a media query, like at media all, which ensures that this style sheet is going to run no matter what kind of device people are using to look at your website. So when we talk about media queries or media at all with this stuff, we're talking about different devices. So a phone is a different medium from a computer. Why it didn't work, I'm not really sure, and I'd have to come take a look at it. Lee, did you have a question? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just did this thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see them both side by side right here. So this is production, and this is on my computer. Uh, is anyone else having trouble getting it to show up on production? No? Okay, cool. Shoot, I was hoping there would be more people because everyone's probably going to have that problem at one point or another. Well, I'll come take a look at it individually in just a moment. Cool. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to go over for this class, for this deployment class. So what I want to do with the rest of the time is just give you guys a chance to just keep on working on whatever it is you're working on and see if you can get your scribble deployed up to Heroku. But before we do that, are there any questions? Yeah, James. Mm-hmm. You can use them. So CDNs aren't a problem at all. For instance, if I wanted to use jQuery, all I need to do is I'm just going to do it the way I would do it in regular old HTML. So which would be script, source, and then it's what, like jQuery.com/whatever. So CDNs you don't need to worry about. They're not considered part of the asset pipeline. You can actually download them and include them in the asset pipeline if you want to. Doing that, pretty much everything you would ever use with a CDN is going to have its own gem. So like you can see here, jQuery has its own CDN. If you wanted to use Bootstrap, Bootstrap also has its own gem. And I would just actually use the gem for it. You could link to it itself, but I would use the gem for it just because the gems are built specifically to like make them work with Rails. Mm-hmm. I would say so. You could certainly try the CDN and just do link rel style sheet href bootstrap.com/whatever. You could do that, but it may not work. In which case, I would recommend using the gem. Yeah.
The only time where I've seen it not work is if you don't use secure.
Like this, right?
That won't work in the phone.
Right. And that's because if you look at, so this is another thing actually. So if you look at this URL up here, you can see that it's HTTPS. Because this is HTTPS, if you try to link to something that's just plain old HTTP, Heroku is going to get grumpy at you. It's considered a security issue. HTTPS sites aren't really supposed to go look at HTTP sites because those are insecure. You don't want to introduce an insecure element into your secure site. And so that can be pretty problematic with CDNs, which is another reason why it would be better to use gems because they sort of take care of that for you. It totally can be done where you can get something from HTTP, but it's more complicated. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Good question. Any other questions? You guys are turned loose? All right.